Great to see you back on our channel. Thanks for tuning in once again for another exciting discussion. If you're like most people, you might not have heard of asset laundering. Sure, you've probably heard of money laundering. But asset laundering sounds a little more complicated, doesn't it? In today's video, we're diving deep into this topic, particularly focusing on how it works in the UK and why it's becoming such a big issue. We'll talk about what asset laundering actually is, how criminals use it to hide or move illicit wealth, and how the UK government and financial institutions are trying to stop it. We'll even look at some real-life examples and explore the legal side of things. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what asset laundering is and why it's so important for the economy, for businesses, and for you to understand. Let's get started. So, what exactly is asset laundering? You've probably heard of money laundering before, which is the process criminals use to make illegally gained money look like it came from a legitimate source. Asset laundering works similarly, but instead of focusing on cash or money, the goal is to disguise the ownership or origin of valuable assets, like property, art, or even expensive jewelry. These assets are typically acquired through illegal activities such as fraud, drug trafficking, or corruption, and the idea is to clean them in a way that makes them look like legitimate wealth. For example, let's say a criminal buys a luxury apartment with money that's been illegally obtained. Instead of just stashing the cash away or hiding it in a bank account, the criminal could use the property as a way to launder their wealth. They might flip it, sell it at a higher price, or transfer it to a shell company to obscure the real owner. Over time, the asset moves further away from its criminal origins, making it harder for authorities to track. Asset laundering has become a big concern in the UK, and for several reasons. First, the UK is home to some of the world's most attractive real estate markets, particularly in places like London. It's not just wealthy British nationals who are investing in properties here. International criminals also view the UK as a safe place to park their illicit wealth. Now, you might be wondering, why the UK? Why is it such a hotbed for asset laundering? The answer lies in the country's reputation for a stable economy, strong legal frameworks, and relatively transparent property systems. This makes it an ideal destination for money launderers who want to move their wealth into a safe haven. Another reason is the UK's status as a global financial center. London, specifically, is a hub for banking and finance, which makes it an attractive location for individuals looking to move large sums of money without drawing too much attention. The sheer volume of transactions happening in the financial sector can make it easier to hide suspicious activity. This opens the door for asset laundering, where criminals can disguise the true ownership of assets by moving them through various channels. Asset laundering isn't just about hiding money in the form of property. In the UK, criminals use several different methods to launder assets. One of the most common methods involves real estate. Criminals might buy properties, sometimes using shell companies to hide the true owner. These companies are often based in tax havens or places with lax financial regulations, making it harder for authorities to track down the real owners. Once the property is in their name, the criminals can either sell it or rent it out, turning what was once illegal wealth into something that appears legitimate. Another method involves the art world. High-value artwork can be bought and sold with relative ease, and because art is so subjective, it's often difficult to determine the true market value. Criminals may purchase expensive pieces of art with illicit funds, then resell them at auction or privately, making it appear like they've made a legitimate return on their investment. Luxury goods like yachts, private jets, and even rare cars can also be used for laundering assets. These items are often purchased with large sums of money that come from illegal sources. Once the asset is acquired, it can either be resold or used to secure loans, helping the criminal to clean their wealth and make it appear legitimate. But there's a more sophisticated method of asset laundering as well. Some criminals will move their assets internationally, using complex networks of offshore trusts and shell companies to conceal ownership. This makes tracking the assets much harder, especially when they're being shifted across borders. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds pretty theoretical, but does asset laundering really happen on a large scale in the UK? Unfortunately, The answer is yes. There have been several high-profile cases over the years where asset laundering has taken place right under our noses. Take, for example, the infamous case of the Azerbaijani laundromat. This scheme involved the movement of over $2.9 billion from Azerbaijan to the UK, with large sums of money being funneled through British banks and then invested in various assets, including real estate. The authorities were able to trace the money, but it took years of investigation, and in the end, many of the individuals involved faced little or no punishment due to loopholes in the law. Another example is the Nigerian prince scam, a notorious case of money laundering linked to a corrupt Nigerian politician. The individual involved funneled large amounts of illicit funds into the UK property market, purchasing multiple high-end properties in London. These properties were later sold, and the money was used to fund political campaigns and other illegal activities. These are just a couple of examples of how asset laundering works in practice. The scale of the problem is massive, and it's not just affecting individuals, it's impacting entire sectors of the economy. The UK government has recognized that asset laundering is a serious problem, and over the past few years, they've introduced stricter regulations to combat it. The UK's regulatory framework is largely centered around anti-money laundering AML laws, but asset laundering is also explicitly addressed through various pieces of legislation. One of the most important pieces of legislation is the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002N. This law allows authorities to seize assets that are believed to be the proceeds of crime, including those obtained through asset laundering. The law has given law enforcement agencies more power to freeze and confiscate assets that are linked to criminal activity, and it's been used in several high-profile cases. In addition, the Unexplained Wealth Order UO was introduced in 2018 as a tool to help authorities seize assets that are thought to have been acquired through illicit means. A UO essentially forces individuals to explain how they came into possession of certain assets. If they can't provide a satisfactory explanation, their assets can be seized. Despite these laws and regulations, tackling asset laundering is no easy feat. There are several challenges that make it difficult for authorities to stop this type of crime. For one, asset laundering is often hidden behind complex financial structures, offshore companies, and international transactions. These networks are difficult to penetrate, especially when they involve multiple countries with different laws and regulations. Another issue is the sheer scale of the problem. The amount of money being laundered through the UK is staggering, and it's hard for regulators to keep up with all the transactions. With so many people involved and so much money at stake, investigating asset laundering can take years, and even when authorities do catch a criminal, there's no guarantee they'll be able to recover all the laundered assets. If you're a business owner, financial professional, or even just an individual thinking about investing in property or luxury assets, you might be wondering, how can you protect yourself from getting caught up in asset laundering? One of the best things you can do is to stay informed. Know the red flags of asset laundering, like sudden cash transactions or shell companies with unclear ownership. If you're in the real estate industry, make sure you're checking the backgrounds of your clients and conducting proper due diligence. Make sure that any investment you make is transparent, and be cautious if you're offered a deal that seems too good to be true. For financial institutions, the key is to have robust anti-money laundering procedures in place. This includes monitoring transactions for suspicious activity, reporting concerns to the authorities, and training staff to spot the signs of asset laundering. So, there you have it. Asset laundering is a complex and growing problem in the UK, with serious implications for businesses, investors, and the economy as a whole. From buying real estate with illicit funds to using luxury assets as a cover for crime, it's a widespread issue that takes many forms. But with stricter laws, better regulations, and increased awareness, the UK is starting to make progress in the fight against asset laundering. If you found this video interesting, be sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into important financial and legal topics. And if you have any questions or thoughts, drop them in the comments.